Hello everyone, and welcome to my video response to Fellow Traveller's video on Dengism and Chinese revisionism. Let's get started.
As of today, Deng Xiaoping theory is the philosophical foundation of the modern-day political economy of the People's Republic of China. Unlike Maoism or traditional Marxism-Leninism, Deng Xiaoping theory posits that the driving force behind the social progress of mankind isn't class struggle, but advances in the productive forces, i.e., scientific innovation, improvements in industrial capacity and output, economic growth, etc.
This is incorrect. The majority of Marxist-Leninist governmental policies actually did prioritise things such as economic growth. The well-known 5-year plan policies were policies intended to promote economic development. Although this is not talked about a lot, especially within Marxist discourse, the Soviet Union by and large had a very privatised economy. Stalin's policies led to a large amount of farms coming under a form of private ownership, and many goods and services were distributed via market forces. In essence, a form of commodity production, or production for the purpose of exchange, as opposed to production for necessity. Another thing worth pointing out is the fact that the majority of bureaucrats responsible for recording economic statistics most often reported most private property as socialist property, which the Soviet constitution defined as state property. Therefore, rather than a deviation away from Marxism-Leninism, it is better to think of Dengism as its logical continuation.
Deng Xiaoping explains himself in a series of interviews and discussions that he had with fellow members of the CCP in the year 1980. Quote, "Revolution means carrying out class struggle, but it does not merely mean that. The development of the productive forces is also a kind of revolution, a very important one. It is the most fundamental revolution from the viewpoint of historical development."
This view of revolution is incorrect. Looking from the viewpoint of historical development, a number of revolutions have happened in regards to economic growth. However, these are not actually revolutions. These are merely a part of the capitalist boom and bust cycle in which every few years ago or so, the economy experiences a large amount of growth and then either slows down to a halt or a large economic crisis arises. Therefore, it would be incorrect to suggest that any of these cycles are in any way revolutionary, since these events just happen as a result of the capitalist system.
Over the past 30 years since the founding of the People's Republic, we have laid the basic socialist foundation in agriculture, industry, and other areas.
Once again, it must be reiterated that the policies of Marxist-Leninist states did not create any form of socialist foundation, and rather laid the developmental foundations for capitalist conditions to arise. Deng is incorrect in this assertion.
But we have a major problem. That is, we have wasted some time and our productive forces have developed too slowly. Since socialism is superior to capitalism, socialist countries should be able to develop their economies more rapidly than capitalist countries, improving their people's living standards gradually and becoming more powerful.
Firstly, the idea of a socialist country is a falsification. Socialism presupposes the abolition of the nation-state, and humanity must have developed past the idea of separate countries for this to occur. Also, by establishing a state that prioritizes living standards whilst maintaining a capitalist economic system will inevitably lead to merely another capitalist superpower. Constant talk about things such as economic growth and living standards is a weak argument in of itself, as socialism as a system presupposes that economic growth is no longer a necessity, since the idea of infinite growth on a finite planet would no longer be a reality under socialism.
We have suffered some setbacks in this respect. The objective of achieving the 4 modernizations was actually put forth by Chairman Mao and announced by Premier Zhu in his report on government work. But how did the Gang of Four respond? They said that it was better to be poor under socialism than to be rich under capitalism. It seems to them that socialism meant pauperism. Marxists have always held that socialism is superior to capitalism, and that socialist countries should be able to develop their productive forces more rapidly than capitalist countries. Lin Bao and the Gang of Four totally deviated from the cardinal principle of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought.
All of this talk about wealth prosperity, economic growth, etc. detracts from the real issues at hand. Socialism has nothing to do with gradually improving living standards, nor does it bear any relation to wealth distribution. Economic success does not determine whether a society is socialist, and usage of economic success as reasoning is a dialectically incorrect form of socio-economic analysis.
Being a large country, China should play a more important role in the world, but owing to its limited strength, it cannot play a greater role. In the final analysis, what we should do is try to promote China's development. It is not enough to just say we are poor, and actually, we are very poor. Such a status quo is far from being commensurate with the standing of a great nation such as ours. Therefore, starting last year, we shifted our focus onto economic development.
This is entirely incorrect and betrays many of socialism's core principles. Socialism is supposed to promote internationalism and solidarity amongst the proletariat, but in this regard Deng is doing the entire opposite, prioritizing the interests of the Chinese nation-state rather than the interests of the proletariat as a whole.
We should research earnestly how to carry out socialist development. At this time, we are reviewing the experience gained in the past 3 decades since the founding of the People's Republic. To sum up, it is as follows. First, we should not adopt leftist policies by divorcing ourselves from reality or skipping over necessary stages. Otherwise, the task of building socialism will not be accomplished. We have suffered losses from leftist policies. Second, whatever we do must contribute to developing the productive forces. In our effort to do this, we should stress economic results. Unless we develop the productive forces, we cannot gradually increase people's incomes.
In this regard, Deng is arguing against a straw man. He states that China has suffered losses from so-called leftist policies that never took place.
We have suffered a great deal in this respect, especially during the 10 years of the Cultural Revolution. We should research why so many African countries which have been developing socialism have become poorer and poorer. We should not consider it to be glorious merely to call our nation socialist, nor should we be content with this, unquote.
And Deng is arguing against a straw man. African countries have not in any way been developing a socialist system, and the reason they have become poorer and poorer is the result of colonial exploitation.
In summary, Deng believed that since China had already had its revolution, in which the exploiters were overthrown by the exploited, on top of the fact that by this point in time China was still very poor and the industrial proletariat still only constituted a minority of the population, that the most important task at hand was economic growth, not class struggle.
While it is true that China did have a revolution, this revolution was not proletarian in nature. As fellow traveller himself admits, China was a largely peasant-based population when the revolution took place. Therefore, the logical conclusion to be drawn from this is that the Chinese Revolution was a bourgeois revolution and not a proletarian one, due to the non-existence of a proletarian majority, which is a necessary precondition to establish socialism.
This is the very essence of Deng Xiaoping theory in a nutshell, that socialism is about generating wealth and prosperity, not the ultimate emancipation of the proletariat.
I'm pretty sure I've already said this, but socialism is not about generating wealth and prosperity. China can't be considered socialist since the prerequisites to be considered socialist are non-existent within Chinese society.
Deng Xiaoping theory presupposes that the exploiter classes have been defeated,
Which has not happened.
that the Communist Party has a monopoly on the political power.
The fact that a self-proclaimed communist party is in charge does not determine whether a society is socialist.
Therefore, the class character of the state is still revolutionary proletarian in nature.
A proletarian state and capitalist class relations cannot coexist.
It even asserts this much in the Constitution. Quote, "In our country, the exploiting class, as a class, has been eliminated, but class struggle will continue to exist with a certain scope for a long time to come. The people of China must fight against those domestic and foreign forces and elements that are hostile and undermine our country's socialist system," unquote. Straight out of the Chinese Constitution.
Тело вихрем обожгла, здесь я посидела от ковыля. Где-то жизнь осталась, станичная, свобода нам досталась, безграничная. Это я в свободу, Максимка пулемет, не ведаем мы броду, но рвемся, брат, вперед. Влево-вправо шастать не для казака. Наше дело шашка, твердая рука. Это я свободу, Максимка пулемет. Не ведаем мы броду, но рвемся, брат, вперед. Влево-вправо шастать не для казака. Наше дело шашка, твердая рука.